Well, thank you so much for joining us for the online.
That's the intro.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for the Online Edge podcast, the only podcast committed to making tandem bikes cool again.
Did you say tandem bikes or
Tandem?
Oh,
Are they tandem?
they're tandem bikes.
Well,
Because it's two people.
I got
it's
it. I was thinking of the 90s band Tantrum, I guess.
That's the intro.
Oh, my gosh.
What are we talking about this week?
All right, Luke, I have a couple of questions for you. Luke, I have a big question for you. It's a question a lot of business owners have. And it is, okay, I can make updates to my website. I can put some Band-Aids on it, so to speak, try to do a little bit of things, but not a massive overhaul. When is it time? Because we go that route sometimes. Of smaller updates of hey, this is pretty good, but there's 2 or 3 things that we can tweak that make this way, way better. When is it time to tweak a website versus overhaul a website? And what are the things that you need to think about when you're making that decision?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We're going to start with the second part first. When do you decide if you should overhaul versus tweak? I mean, first of all, if you have a site that's built prior to 2015, it's probably ready for some pretty decent updates.
Wow. Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, as far as the looks, the feels, like things move on and it needs to progress with the way sites are moving as far as the way they look and how they feel. 100%, if your site's not mobile friendly, you need to have a site that is mobile friendly. There's several different tests out there on Google that Google provides that you can test your site to see how it ranks as far as a mobile friendly.
There's nothing more annoying than getting onto a website as a consumer
on your phone,
and you can't, and it doesn't flow with it's not mobile friendly.
Here's the really simple test for yourself. Okay. If your site is mobile friendly or not. Basically, what you do is you pull your site up on your phone, and if you have to pinch and squeeze to zoom in on the site, it's not mobile friendly. It should automatically show up perfectly.
If your
on
website
your phone
pisses you off when you get on your phone, imagine what it does to your customers.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the first thing, right?
That's a really good one.
The second thing is so say it is maybe from 2015. And somebody really hasn't spent any money on SEO, marketing, whatever. They just built a site and it's out there, and it's more of a digital postcard than it is a lead generating magnet. Maybe people use that to just see if you're legit or not. You really don't have a lot of experience, or there's no information out there about how the site performs, right? Like you have to use that. You have to take that user experience into your decision making of, is this worth overhauling or not?
Good.
And the only way to know that is if you have hundreds of users hitting the site and you can track what they're doing. So so typically what I advise clients to do, right? Besides whether it's, okay, let's update the site and do an overhaul in the way that it looks and everything like that, or spend the money on driving traffic to the site. It's a better idea, if you don't have current traffic and you don't know what's going on, to start driving traffic to the site and start tracking what the user is doing when they get there. Okay. Seeing what the bounce rate is. Look, if you send somebody to a site and it's a little bit older site, and the bounce rate's lower than 40%, then the site's doing pretty good, and then it just needs some minor refreshes to make it look more up to date.
Talk to me about, just explain for those, it's semi-clear language, but just explain, just in case somebody who's listening doesn't know, what is a bounce rate?
So the bounce rate is somebody going to the site and then immediately leaving and going to somebody else's site, or continuing to go to other sites before they clear their search bar and do a completely new search. Okay, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So a successful user experience is somebody leaving the site and then going straight to a new search inquiry.
Got it.
But if they're leaving the site and going to a competitor's site and then they're going through their site and then leaving, they're going to get the check mark. So you want to see what that looks like. You want to see how long somebody's spending on your site. Are they spending 45? You can get all of this stuff from Google Analytics and it's free. You can put the code on your site by just going up and setting up a Google Analytics account, and that's 100% free.
It's such a big deal to use the free tools that are exposed.
100%.
Yeah.
And all of this information is on there. And so it's important to see how many pages is somebody viewing. How long are they on the site? What is the bounce rate?
Yep.
If you want more information about what are people specifically interacting with, we've used a service called Crazy Egg. And basically what it is, it's a service that tracks what people are looking at, what people are clicking on. If you have one of the sites where it's just a scroll and there's no real tabs, you can see how many people are actually scrolling through lower.
Yep.
And it's actually really interesting to me how many people are they really don't leave the fold, which is what shows up when you click.
Whenever you click on it without having to scroll up, that's
above the fold is what shows up on your screen. So much of what people are viewing and they only view is right there. So how are you communicating to people in that limited space is very important.
That's a big deal.
Right? But I wouldn't spend a crazy amount of dollars. Website redesigns cost anywhere from $1,000 to $7,000, depending on what you need. And I wouldn't go spending a whole bunch of money on a site overhaul without having the information of what people are doing and what they're interacting with and what needs to be tweaked and all of that stuff. So I would send traffic to the site first, get that rolling, see what people are doing, and then go back and say, okay, we know we have a 65% bounce rate or an 80% bounce rate or something. 80% is incredibly high, but sometimes it's 60%. How do we keep more people on the site longer? And how do we answer the questions they need? And we do that in a way that intrigues people and wants them and makes them want to interact with us.
Got it.
And do that first before, send the traffic, do all of that before you go spending a whole bunch of money, and then you can actually have the data behind your decision on what needs to be changed and what doesn't. But anything before that, you're just taking shots in the dark and you're just going to make a guess.
That makes sense.
If your site is pre-2015, so from 2000 to 2015, that site is so old, it doesn't make any sense to keep that. That is where you should be making some updates. You don't necessarily need to do a complete overhaul just yet, but you want to do some things that make it look newer, because that will, you could just have a really high bounce rate because the site looks old. So there are certain circumstances that make sense to just do a refresh or maybe even a complete overhaul, but it needs to be a really old site. But if you have a newer site that's like I said, last 5 years, it's been developed and maintained and stuff, and you just want to figure out how to make it better, I would really go through and look at the analytics behind what people are doing and how they're interacting with the site.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so next question is going to be this. Obviously, there's a lot of things that go into this, but whenever you start talking about complete overhaul of a site, people start getting real worried about costs and all that kind of stuff. What are some of the questions that you would suggest people ask as they're vetting out? Because it seems like everybody can make a website these days. Yeah. Sort of.
Sure.
What are some of the questions that you would ask to be able to vet out? Obviously you want something to look good. You want it to communicate who you are well. But as you're thinking about who you're going to use to redo your website, would you encourage them to interview more than one person?
100%.
What kind of questions do you ask in this situation? Before he even gets into this, I want to say one thing. You can pay a incredible amount for a website. I've seen websites before, kind of in the educational platform side of things, where they needed individual logins and they needed be able to complete courses and all that kind of stuff for educational institution, that kind of stuff. You can pay $250,000 for a new website if you needed to have a whole bunch of capabilities to it, and you can pay $2,000 for a website if you need a landing page that has very, very little interaction to it. So how much something costs is is going to be so, dependent on the individual business and what their needs are. But what are some of the questions besides maybe getting into the cost questions? What are some of the questions that you would encourage people to ask as they're vetting people to allow them into something that is really incredibly personal almost in a website?
Yeah.
I mean, you're almost giving somebody access to your bank account when you let them into your website. So talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's so true. And you also, I mean, you really want to vet somebody out to make sure that they're the right person, because you can do a lot more harm than good in a lot of situations. And you can go through and spend X amount of dollars on a site and then find out that it's not performing any better, or maybe worse than the previous site. And so you don't want to spend that same amount of money twice, right? So it's so important to figure out who the right people are to engage with that. And I mean, the first step, like anything else, is I would ask for references. Okay. I would look at those sites, and there's a lot of people out there that are really great at building sites, right? That's great. But how do you create a conversion off of a site, right? Like there's two really different things that a lot of people don't really understand, and especially in smaller business. It's all about the customer experience more than it is the beauty, the feel, the look, all of this stuff about the site. It's conveying the customer experience through the website.
Really good.
Than it is the way that a site looks. The way that what I mean by that, an example would be Nike or some of these massive brands. Like, you get to those sites and they're just beautiful. They look great. They feel right. It's more of artwork than it is a conversion tool, where you get into smaller businesses, blue collar spaces, plumbing, electrical, HVAC, gyms, whatever. It's all about the user experience. How do you make the customer go through an experience in their head that makes them go, okay, this is where I need to go. They're going to solve the problem that I have right now.
And it can be both, by the way. It can be a beautiful site and at the same time performs what you need it to perform. What you don't want is to purchase a piece of art that doesn't do anything for you.
Yeah. So, which is where we see some sites end up, and it's like, wow, this thing looks amazing. But then it doesn't, what does it do? You're sending 500 people to the site a month and 5 people called you. It's like, that doesn't, how does that help you? You know? And so it is so important to find somebody that understands conversions on top of the way that something looks, feels, interacts. But it is, I mean, the way to make a site actually convert is probably the most important part. From the copy, from the imagery, from where to put something, where to put the call to action. All of that stuff is so important. And if you just hire a Blow Joe, whatever, your cousin, your neighbor, your uncle, whatever, your neighbor down the street, and they don't really understand that. They may be really good at WordPress or putting everything together, but if they don't really have the knowledge and the understanding of the psychology of what makes somebody actually take action, then it really doesn't help you. And so that's sometimes where you see sites that are that might be the difference between a $4,000 site and a $2,000 site, because a $2,000 site, somebody's pulling stock images, putting something together that looks like you're in a competition, whatever, where somebody that really understands how to position something to make the user interact with you, mostly being how do you make them call you or fill out a form submission, which is really the end goal. If they don't understand that, then what's the point?
And that's part of the interview process. I'll give you an example. I do for sure a lot of film stuff. And one of the things that, as I'm talking to clients about that, is I let them know, hey, I'm going to make something look beautiful for you, but we're marketers first, and that's how we think. Yeah. You probably want to hear that somewhere along the way from your web developer of, hey, this is not just somebody who's going to put something together for you, but they are thinking without you even having to initiate that. Okay, if they ask the question, what do we need this to do? Like, what is the path that we're trying to get people to follow? What's the funnel that we're trying to get people to jump into? If they're talking like that, those are good signs of knowing, okay, they get it. They get that I need this thing to do more than just look good. I need people to hit this page and I need them to call me. Or I need people to hit this page, I need them to fill out this form. Or I need people to hit this page, I need them to click directions to my facility.
Yep.
All that stuff is right there. And you need to have somebody who thinks like that, who is for you as a business owner more than they're just trying to give you something pretty. We want it to be pretty. We also want it to actually do what it was designed to do. And that's a huge part of this thing.
Some of the things too that are important are thinking about, going back to my first point of user experience, is that you should be portraying how they're going to have, what's the interaction they're going to have with you. And I see more times than not where somebody puts themselves, which is so easy to do, as kind of like the superhero.
Right.
Look, I think the best analogy that I've ever heard is make it like a superhero movie. You know, like who's the winner at the end of the day? It needs to be the consumer for choosing you, right? Good. They need to be the person that is the winner. And so how do you position your site to communicate that they choosing you are the superhero for fixing their problem, and put that front and center, versus a lot of times I see people putting, the image of the business owner or their trucks or something like that. It should be more about the consumer than it is about the business owner.
Right.
And you should look, small business is small business, and a lot of times people do business with you because of you, but that's not necessarily the front and center thing that should be out there when somebody hits the site right away. And totally have an about us, all about you and what you do and why you do it. But I don't think that should be the front and center thing on the main part of the site. Make it about the consumer making the right decision to choose you and you solving their problem.
And even something you just said about, small business, and they may choose you for you. A lot of times it's even one step deeper than that, and it goes along with what you just said. It's they choose you for how you make them feel.
Yeah.
When you're around them. I mean, I'm thinking of a couple of clients right now that I've heard their customers talk about them and how they feel when they're around this person and that kind of thing. And that's why they choose them. And so when you're thinking this kind of stuff through, you definitely want to make sure that I always say, think about it in story mode. The hero of the story is not you, the business, and the hero of the story is not your web developer. The hero of the story is not us as marketers. The hero of the story is the customer.
Yep.
And you're the guide along the way to help them defeating whatever that problem is. Because if you're in business, you're in the business of solving problems so that they can get on to the next thing and the next thing and the thing after that. We gotta be actually customer focused in this. And your website can do that. If they gotta hunt 17 pages to find the answer to their question, you've just made you the focus and not them the focus. Or your web developer made themselves the focus.
Sure.
And not the customer the focus. Man, make that stuff easy so that it's easy to do business with you. If your website is making it harder for people to do business with you, it's time to do something drastic. If your website should be the front door for people to make it very easy to do business with you. So jump on there, think about it like a consumer, and decide, hey, I can tweak this thing and make it awesome. Or, man, I got to overhaul this thing. Thank you guys so much for watching the Online Edge podcast. If you haven't already, click that subscribe button. We do new podcasts every single week. And if you loved it, click that like button. Leave us a comment. We've already done a podcast based off of a question that we got in the comments. Leave us a comment. If you hated it, thumbs it down twice just to show us how bad it ticked you off. And we will see you guys next Thursday.